You're listening to Graveyard Show Classic.
Good evening, friends of the undead. I am the Deacon of Darkness, the posthumous pimp. Freak Show!
And I am the Diva of Dismemberment, Mistress of the Blade, June the Meat Cleaver, from the Bordello of Horror.
You're getting your freak on with the Caretaker on the Graveyard Show.
Step into the graveyard with the Caretaker at graveyardshow.com. That is graveyardshow.com.
Podcast number 53, January 21st, 2010.
Welcome to the Graveyard. Enter the Graveyard every Thursday night, midnight Eastern, 9 p.m. Pacific. And now, coming to you from Los Angeles, please welcome your host, the Caretaker.
And welcome to another edition of the Graveyard Show podcast. I am your Caretaker, and the Graveyard is open. Yes, it is time to talk After Dark Horrorfest IV, the 8 films to die for, which is coming to theaters on January 29th, running through the 5th of February. And we here at the Graveyard Show will be devoting our next 3 podcasts to the After Dark Horrorfest. Brian Pulido, he is the director and writer of the film The Graves, which stars Bill Moseley and Tony Todd, among others. We're going to talk about what it was like working with them, making his first feature film, shooting in Arizona, which was no small feat to say the least. This week's featured music comes from the Graves soundtrack. Brian Pulido was nice enough to hook me up with some music from his film, so we'll be playing some tracks from the Graves soundtrack. Brian Pulido, whose film The Graves is one of the 8 films to die for. Sit back, relax, and enjoy, my friends, and I will see you on the other side. Brian Pulido is a graduate of NYU's Tisch School of the Arts and the founder of Chaos Comics. He has created and written hundreds of comic books, including Lady Death, Evil Ernie, Purgatory, and licensed comics, including A Nightmare on Elm Street, Chucky, Friday the 13th, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just to name a few. His film, The Graves, is one of this year's 8 films to die for, and the film stars 2 horror favorites, Tony Todd and Bill Moseley. Brian now joins me on the show. Brian, thank you for taking the time to come into the Graveyard.
Thank you so much, Caretaker. I'm stoked to be here.
Well, why don't you tell everybody out there what The Graves is about?
Well, The Graves is about 2 sisters, Megan and Abigail Graves. Megan, the older of the 2, has always taken care of Abby. And these 2 girls are rock and roll loving comic geek chicks. But it just so happens that Megan is going to leave Arizona for New York for a job. So the 2 decide to have one last weekend bender together. And these 2 quirky, hot sisters like to go check out weird parts of Arizona, particularly Megan. So they take off and eventually get lost in a town called Unity, Arizona, where they are encouraged to visit a place called Skull City Mine. From there, they encounter all sorts of strange and heinous menaces, both human and supernatural. And the story turns into a mind-bending fight for survival.
Wow.
So that's one way to look at the plot. Another way to look at the plot is that this is the story of how 2 sisters unwittingly become monster slayers. So take your pick.
And there you go. 2 great descriptions of this film. I'm ready to go see this right now. So, how did you come up with the story?
Well, I think before I even wrote the story, I had made another film and had it on the film festival circuit, a short film called Kill or Known, also known as There's Something Out There. And what I learned from that experience was that it really wasn't enough just to make a competent horror film. People want something fresh and something personal. So I just took a look at what was very, very interesting to me, and two things emerged. I'm very interested in stories where women come into power, and I also love survival horror films. So I knew that those were going to be two dominant elements of this story. Now, in real life, my wife and I really do like to go find weird places and visit them. For example, like the Titan Missile Museum outside of Tucson, Arizona. And in one of our excursions, we found a place called Historic Vulture Mine outside of Wickenburg, Arizona. Now, this place is an abandoned mine town with over 30 buildings. And you're allowed to take a self-guided tour where you walk through these buildings that are about to fall down on you. And it's a very eerie place, even in the daytime. There's always wind. There is the incessant sound of thousands of flies. And it is fabled to be haunted. So when it came time to write a story, that was the melange that was going in my brain. I knew I liked that location, so I wanted to include it. I wanted to tell a story of some girls coming into power. Some other things that I knew I didn't want to deal with was, for example, in a standard survival horror story, you're frequently looking at 6 or 7 people, typically college age, who very often don't even know each other and don't have much characterization, and they get knocked off one by one. I was more inspired by movies like Jeepers Creepers, where I took a look at a brother and sister and saw how they survived. So I said to myself, again with this melange kind of going through my brain, all right, let's deal with some sisters and see how they survive this insurmountable circumstance. So that's a bunch of what was going through my brain at the time when I sat down to write The Graves. And as I wrote it, I kept putting inside stuff that I love and adore. Rock and roll. So, I invited a rock star friend of mine, Randy Blythe, to be in it. Band friends like Calabrese, and got some really fun music. I love living in Arizona. I like the qualities out here, which a lot of people across the country don't get to see. So I included a lot of locations that were exciting to Arizona. So that's really a free-form explanation of what was going on in my mind to create The Graves.
You'd mentioned that you like writing stories of women in powerful positions or getting into a powerful position. As a man writing not just one but 2 female leads, did you find it difficult to write women characters? Was it something that came easy for you? Was it something that maybe you spoke to your wife about? How exactly did you go about the process of writing these 2 lead characters?
I think ultimately you're going to have to ask audience members if I was successful or not, but writing female characters has been pretty natural for me because largely when I grew up I was raised mostly by my mother and my sister. My dad was around and he was totally cool, but I think the ladies in the house were really kind of moving things along. So it's very natural for me to see women in positions of power and authority taking charge and getting things done. So I've written characters, like you had mentioned, Lady Death, Purgatory, Chastity, and others. So writing female characters, I don't give it a lot of thought. I simply try to look at them as human beings and put them in pretty gripping situations. And that's another thing that I find myself drawn to and compelled to write about, which is taking people and putting them in these really tough, insurmountable circumstances and see how they react and grow. Can they survive? And typically, in my worldview, these terrible situations forge these people and force them to adapt into new things. So I didn't find it difficult. Didn't do too much consulting, just sort of kind of wrote on the fly. And I guess judging from the actresses' reactions, I was pretty close in most cases, and if I wasn't, they were really helpful.
Now, this is your first film. This is your directing debut. You came from or come from the world of comic books.
Yes.
So, how did this road come about? Were you a fan of horror growing up, and you read comics? Did you? How did this road come about?
Well, I've always been, probably some of my earliest thoughts are watching horror films. I remember watching The Hideous Sun Demon as a kid. I think I was really lucky because my mother loved horror films and turned me on to them. So I remember distinctly one night, it's really late at night, my mother's waking me up and she's like, "Brian, wake up. Come watch TV. Vincent Price is throwing bodies into a bonfire." So that's a pretty typical experience. I also saw the movie Night of the Living Dead in the drive-in as it came out. So I was exposed to horror early on. I've been a Fangoria reader since number 1. I have my big fat famous monsters collection, my giant horror comic collection. So it's always been there for me. Same thing with comics. I learned to read with comics. I actually had a little bit of a learning disability in 2nd grade. I was a little behind everybody, and through comics I was actually able to kind of leap ahead a little bit because I really learned how to read through comics. So both of them were concurrent interests. Now, how the Graves came about specifically is a different tale. So I started veering back towards making movies a couple years back. I went to our local community college, Scottsdale Community College out here, which happens to be the best film school in the state. Not ASU, not any other ones, just this community college has a terrific course with great teachers. And I went through their whole track and understood the digital technology. I also used those courses to make a short film shot on 16 millimeter. There's something out there. And then I continued to develop my skill sets, doing viral marketing campaigns, local commercials, music videos, all kind of as proof of concept to myself and my team that we could make these movies. There's something out there. Went on the festival circuit. It did very well, played close to 50 film festivals. It won a bunch of awards, and it gave us confidence to use that as a tool to go to investors to raise the funds for the Graves. So that's a little bit of how we all came to it.
Did you feel going into this, having experience with comic books, which is obviously a very visual medium, did you find that that really did give you a lot of experience going into directing before even shooting a roll or a frame of a film?
I think so. I mean, the main thing about even film school and then going into comics is that you just get a training of telling a story in pictures. And there's gigantic differences, obviously, between the two. I mean, largely in a comic, you could write anything you want. On page 1, panel 1, you could say the world explodes. And that really didn't cost that much to do, other than paying me and the artists. If you do the exact same thing in a movie, it costs 100 times more. So that's one of the differences there. And then another big difference is that a comic book is frequently, writing one is sort of a solitary experience, sort of like writing a screenplay. And then to come out and make a film, you really are working with tons and tons of people. However, having a visual storytelling background totally helped the storyboarding, shot listing of the movie, and communicating with everybody. I mean, in fact, long before the movie ever began, we had it shot listed, storyboarded. We had spent literally weeks in the location, dressing them, improving them, working out some of the blocking and shooting, and it seemed as a natural extension of being a comic storyteller. Story is key, and in filmmaking, I think the key difference is that performance is key, and everything serves performance, but we still had everything kind of ready, and if any of our plans needed adjusting and needed to serve the performances, we were ready to do that, but at least we were really ready and had a plan.
Sure. What kind of shooting schedule were you looking at for this?
Well, the Braves had a 18-day shooting schedule, which in our case translated to about 5 pages a day. And that was rigorous, because in the short films, like There's Something Out There, we only had to do 3 pages a day. So we were really crafting the shots and had time. Now we had to shoot, so we shot 5 pages a day. A couple times we had to do 7. And we did it in really tough location. Historic Vulture Mine is a half hour outside of Wickenburg, Arizona.
Yeah.
It has no endemic, it has no water, no electricity, It has 6 breeds of rattlesnakes that crawl on the ground. There's tarantulas, there's scorpions, there's buildings falling apart that should be condemned. There's nails all over the place. So for us to pull our movie off, we actually had to bring a small town with us. We brought everything to move actors to the locations inside the main grounds. We had golf carts. We used ATVs and trailers to move grip and electric equipment in. We had 7 trailers for actors and crew, etc., and editorial. So we really did bring in an entire, town to pull it off. However, all that being said, we only went overtime for one day by about 45 minutes, and we frequently finished early. And that's even including, since we shot in May, out here in Arizona, at that time of year, our nights were really short. They were about 10 and a half hours from sundown to sunup. Okay. So our strategy when we shot at night was to use 2 cameras. And that's what we did. We shot on the Red camera system, and we shot, we were shooting constantly. So it was challenging, but we used all those challenges to our advantage, and I personally just didn't feel like I was going without too much, I mean, I might not have had a fancy Luma crane, but, I still had my Starbucks coffee, and I was ready to shoot, so I was happy.
The essentials.
The essentials.
Exactly. Yeah, because I don't think people understand, when they see movies that are shot in these really kind of hazardous locations and it looks like, it's 130 degrees or it looks like it's, 30 below zero, and it's like, wow, it looks really cold, and it's like, or really hot, and it's like, well, it was. Can you talk about, it's hard enough to direct your first film, let alone being out in these elements like Arizona can present or California can present. Can you talk about that? I mean, the heat and what it's like going into a day of shooting, especially an 18-day shooting. 5 pages, a lot of pages to cover, especially in a horror film. We have, blood and effects and all kinds of stuff. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you bet. I formally, many years ago, was an assistant director mostly on commercials and music videos. So that helped me work with my assistant directors to strategize what we should shoot and when. Now, usually in May in Arizona, what you can expect is about 80 to 90 degree weather, which is pleasant, believe it or not, and it should be sunny. However, when we shot, we had so many different weather conditions. It was daunting at times. So on day 2, we had rain. You have to understand, in Arizona, that's like, where did the rain come from?
Sure.
So you immediately jump onto a plan B and change the schedule around and shoot something inside. So what began to emerge, like that, it was a little daunting, but what emerged was we shot a scene that we were going to shoot later in the schedule sooner, but we had this beautiful, natural, moody lighting because, it was overcast, it was lightning occasionally, and it really served the scene. Now, by day 7, that was Bill Moseley's first night, or first day, and it was 107 degrees. And so you're asking me, what's that like? Well, we had just come off a very brief amount of rest. I think we worked until Saturday morning at daylight, around 6 a.m. Now we're back at work 36 hours later, and it's hotter than all get out. It's hotter than hell. And, different people have different responses to the heat. As the writer-director and one of the producers, I just thought I was Captain Ahab, and I just had to get things done. So I did what I could to always mush along. But I can tell you that I think I had 9 Gatorades that day and never went to the bathroom.
Oh, yes.
It would just sweat out of you. And some of our people took it in stride, and some people, it just laid some people to waste. Like we had one person who went to the hospital for dehydration. We had one person when we had wind. On day 1, actually, setting up a tent, a gust of wind got a hold of him and put him 30 feet in the air, and he landed on the side of a truck. He was okay, but that really happened. And then we had those challenges, and that particular day was so hot. I think by the end of the day, we were frying, and thankfully it went back down to normal weather. Yeah. But 2 days later, we were finally shooting an interior, the interior of a schoolhouse scene. It's a pretty horrific scene with Bill Moseley and Claire Grant. And we're in this actual schoolhouse that we dressed to be sort of like what's going on inside of Bill Moseley's character's mind, which is like a child's idea of a schoolroom. But the roof was tin, and we had a gigantic hailstorm. It was 49 degrees with hail and lightning. So we had to turn off our generator, shut our production down, and just pray to the film gods for some relief. And we actually had to shut down and twiddle our thumbs for about 45 minutes. So in a period of 3 days, 72, 80 hours, we went from 107 to 49 in hail. Now, the ultimate crazy thing about all this is that all of it just wound up serving the film. It never, I dare someone to watch the film and say, oh, there's a continuity error because of that. It was just strange how we would be shooting a given scene, we'd get this weird weather condition, and it just helped. So the 107-degree day, that was where we're actually filming in, more or less in script order, Bill Moseley's first appearance. Man, that just really served that section of the film. And later on, when we had this terrible hailstorm, it's one of the darker, more hopeless parts of the film. It happens to be very dark outside and dim, and with the whipping winds and stuff. And again, it just happened to serve. So we paid the cost for experiencing those things, but I think it just helped the film ultimately. My final comment on terms of just the stamina involved, like doing a film in 3 weeks at that speed really is like climbing Mount Everest up and down 3 or 4 times, and it'll test your endurance physically for sure. I mean, myself, my DP, production designer, we found ourselves doing our shooting day, going home, eating, and going right to sleep. Yeah. We had some other crew members who partied, and to be honest with you, they paid for it. Then we had other crew members who partied, and like our key grip, Gary Shaw, great guy. At the end of the day, he'd party his ass off and still show up on set ready to go. So I guess different people have different reactions and temperaments to that grueling of a schedule.
Sure. I mean, and it is grueling. I mean, I've heard horror stories about crews, shooting in deserts, and it is brutal. And the exact opposite, shooting in cold, extreme cold. It's like, you're looking like the Michelin Man out there, and it's like, oh, if you take off your gloves in this, your hands will freeze off. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, well, we're gonna go shoot a movie now. Okay, everybody.
It is crazy. I mean, I think ultimately, different people have different experiences. Like, for example, because I had shot things before and in different conditions, I didn't see our movie as being tough. Whereas, some people, one of our producers was like, this was the toughest shoot I was ever on in my life. I just looked at him and said, okay, not for me. Yeah. But, it was physically exhausting, but, it wasn't as if we were shooting these crazy wraparound 18-hour days and people were falling off the scaffolding and dying. We were very cognizant of safety, being really respectful of the amount of time we work in a day, and I personally just believe there's only a certain amount of time one can work in a day where everyone becomes ineffective and it becomes unsafe. So
sure.
We worked hard at being smart, efficient, and fast. But everyone has a different experience of that stuff.
Yeah. Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, having production experience. Can you talk to my listeners out there? Because they see credits, and if you don't work in film or in television, you really don't understand what some of the positions do. Can you talk about how and what it is that your ADs, your assistant directors, do for you on a production?
Yeah, you bet. I mean, an assistant director, to put it in really simple terms, if the director is the driver of the car, the assistant director is the chief mechanic who oversees all the people that gets that car ready to drive. So in a practical sense, the assistant director is scheduling everything in the movie in terms of time, labor, and effort. And in the actual, that department generates what's called a call sheet. It lets everybody know what time they're supposed to show up. They keep an eye on all the talent, when they're supposed to arrive and when they're supposed to leave. Because, typically we're working under union rules, and each union has different rules that have to be followed, and the assistant directors keep an eye on that. The assistant directors are in charge of the momentum of the day, getting that 5 pages I mentioned, getting that work done. And they're also in charge of all the secondary background action you see in a movie is typically choreographed, blocked, and directed by the assistant director team. So that's some of what they do. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And also,
Yeah.
they get the actors through the works and all kinds of other
Through
stuff.
the works, exactly. So they get,
Yeah.
and the works is a nickname for makeup, wardrobe, and hair.
Mm-hmm.
I personally call those people the wrecking crew.
Yeah.
Other people call them the works.
And on that note, we'll move on to the cast.
Sure. I guess you could call them the glam squad.
The
too.
glam squad, the vanities is another one. Yeah,
Sure.
they're all time. Now you've mentioned Bill Moseley's name a few times. Also, Tony Todd is in your film. Two horror icons. How was it that you were able to score them into this film?
Well, we also had yet another horror icon. We had Amanda Wyss, who played, among many other things, Tina in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. She was Freddy Krueger's first victim, and we knew we had to have her. We also scored Dee Randall Bly, the lead singer of Lamb of God, my favorite current metal band, and others. But it really was the fine work of Brian Ronalds, Dean Ronalds, Greg Secchi, of Ronalds Brothers Productions, also producers on the film, who really pushed for having the recognizable, iconic talent in the movie. And it was those guys who really made it happen. They simply got the script into these guys' hands pretty rapidly and got answers to see whether they wanted to be on or not. In fact, I think our casting process went fairly quick, I think 7 or 8 weeks. And Bill and Tony were among the first people cast. And, again, it's those guys who deserve the credit. I mean, it was really simple. They said, "Hey, Brian, do you think Tony Todd would be great in this role?" And I'd say, "Well, heck yeah." Or, "Hey, Brian, do you think Bill Moseley would tear it up in this role?" I'm like, "Totally." And, that was my job, and then they went after it, and they deserve all the credit for that.
Now, having these film vets on set, and again, this was your first feature film as director, did you find that having, these vets on your set helped you progress through the day? Did you ever, at any point, maybe seek their advice about anything? Or was it just, we got 5 pages to do, let's go and let's do it?
Well, no, we actually had a lot of fun. There was always the timing element was a given, but I never stopped, or I never moved forward unless we got something that was authentic. Having the guys there was terrific, largely because they're just pros. These guys, when you look at Tony and Bill as an example, you're looking for sure at the Robert De Niro and Al Pacino of horror. These guys could be working far outside the field, and they do, but in our genre, these guys are phenomenal talent. So I actually just engaged them. I cut them loose and let them invent what they wanted, and I trusted that the script itself had the need, want, and intention of those characters outlined enough such that they could go crazy and really invent the character, take ownership. I found them to be totally supportive the whole time. It was never intimidating for me. I got Tony Todd real quick. Tony has a way of kind of testing everybody and prodding a little, and I got it instantaneously because I was raised in a family where there's like a lot of colorful characters, and there's different ways that people kind of test each other's mettle, and I actually adored that about Tony. I actually saw him a couple days ago. I was just laughing because I remember that stuff, and really think that makes him really fun to have around on a set. And both of those guys were so professional, such a great example for other people. They show up with their work, have their lines down cold, are really ready to work and turn it on. So having those guys there was great. They've made the material come alive in a way I couldn't have predicted, and they deserve all the credit for doing that.
Do you feel having them in your film gave the movie a sort of a validity?
Without a doubt. I think it's another thing I thought that I learned the hard way making short films. I had a short film on the circuit, and it got a certain amount of attention. But what I noticed was some films that I didn't even think necessarily were good, but had names in them, got a lot of attention. So it may be very easy for other people to have learned that lesson, but the lesson that I learned is that stars get eyeballs on a movie. So yes, we thought that having the great cast that we had would help elevate it, for lack of a better term.
So how did you end up getting the film in the After Dark Horrorfest?
We spent our time completing the film, going through the editing process, sound design, visual effects, etc. We built our website, made our trailer, all that stuff. All that stuff that I just told you took 10 seconds to say, of course, took a year, 9 months to do. But when the movie was completely complete, we submitted screener copies to 26 known distributors that distribute this kind of stuff. And we bypassed the film festival circuit completely and simply then took a look at all the deals that were offered to us and ultimately chose the deal that we thought would present the film in the best light. And After Dark was always one of our top goals, is to be distributed by them, so we're just happy it worked out that way. So in a way, it was a fairly simplistic process. We completed the film, we sent out a bunch of screeners, we heard people's interest, everything from lack of interest to great interest, and the various things they would do or not do for the film, and we picked the one that we thought collectively best served the film's interest.
Now, are you, and it's just between you and me here now, Brian, nobody else is
Sure,
listening.
just between us, caretaker.
Just between us. Will you be going to any of the screenings?
No doubt. I mean, I love seeing how people react or don't react, because that's my litmus test of how we did, whether it was good, it was bad. We're trying a couple things here and there, and love to see people's reactions. And about April of last year, we had some test screenings. I mean, not really scientific test screenings, but we just wanted to see how it would play to audiences. And a couple of us were hidden away just watching, and it was really gratifying, because one element of making the movie is going out there and making it. I actually find the whole process totally gratifying and exciting. But where the rubber hits the road is how it plays to an audience. Does it play? Does it not play? Are certain things that are supposed to be funny? Are they funny? Are scary parts scary? How does it leave the audience emotionally? The only way I'm going to learn more about that is by seeing how the movie works. So that's my long-winded way of saying, hell yeah, I'll be there.
Now, as I mentioned at the top, you are a graduate of NYU Tisch School of the Arts. Mm-hmm. Your DP for this film is also not only a graduate of NYU, but a longtime friend of yours, Adam Goldfine. Talk about the relationship that you guys have.
Adam Goldfine and I have been best friends since the age of 12. We have never lived more than 50 miles from each other since that age. And working with Adam and also my wife Francisca as production designer makes the whole process that much more fun, because we have a shorthand together. There's a certain way that we could communicate, and Adam is enormously talented as a lighting director, as a camera operator, and as a director of photography. In fact, the funny thing is he is a former cameraman and gaffer in the 90s, and he stopped doing it. And I was looking around for DPs when I was starting up again on my short There's Something Out There. And I was looking at all these people in town, but then I kept coming back, and I'm like, I'm just going to have to ask Adam, but he doesn't want to do this. So I ask him, and he turns me down. And I ask him, and he turns me down. And I tell him, I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're really doing with your life, but I am telling you, this is your passion, and this is one of your full expressions as an artist is to do this, damn it. And so I finally convinced him, but begrudgingly. I mean, he answered yes, sort of like when you ask a buddy to move, and you're like, it's the thing you got to say yes to. It's like, yeah, okay, dude, I'll help you move. But I think it did kind of reawaken the artist in him again, and he's a blast to work with. I mean, we have the shorthand, and it's such a family kind of feeling when you have, like, my wife, who I adore and love, and have been with for many years, and then Adam, this trusted cadre of people that you're moving on a project with. It makes it that much more delectable of an experience.
Sure, and it helps on, 14-hour days in the desert. with
Yeah, I mean, we're
snakes
not
and-
like, I think all of us, like myself and friend, we're far beyond like bitter arguments and fights about stuff. So we tend to be able to solve stuff, and even if we do get kind of excitable, and I do have a tendency to be fun and excitable and passionate on set, we get past it, and we just get the show on the road. And Adam tends to be kind of the cold, cool, and collected one, and I tend to run a little hot. I'm Spanish and Irish, so together it goes like woo woo woo. So it makes a good pairing, where he's calm, cool, and collected. I'm reasonably calm, cool, and collected, but fairly passionate, and it makes an interesting. It does make
dynamic
collaboration. Yeah, good dynamic.
Yeah. Now you've mentioned your wife Francisca. You have worked together for quite a long time now.
We have.
How have you guys?
22 years.
22 years. Wow. How have you been able to balance? I mean, because some people have a hard time, being married for 22 years is within itself you have to work at. Being married and working together, how have you guys been able to balance that?
Yeah, how have we been able to do it without being at each other's throats? But we're not. I don't exactly know how, but I do know that when we are working, that's a different set of circumstances than we're living our life. Like, I actually, the type of person that I have to be to direct a film where, I'm leading a ship, so to speak, or I'm leading the circus. I don't want to be that person in my real life, so I don't want to wake up in the morning and say, okay, put the camera here. So, you're taking on a role, and we all kind of know the roles that we're playing at those times, and, I think, again, largely, we must have just worked out a lot of weird stuff, because, we don't really nip at each other or get in fights on set. We're really typically working towards the whole. I think that maybe that's it, because the script is the key to us in a movie, and the script contains the answers. I don't contain the answer. The script contains the answer. So, the question might be, well, what do you think would be the colors of this particular set in the scene? And I would say, I don't know. What do you think the script says about that? And Francisca may come up with stuff. And I think we have a nice dynamic, and it's a nice homogenous group. But I'm sorry, I don't have great stories of us flipping out and leaving. In fact, it's the opposite. We're fairly good dynamic. We're all I was
going to say.
About
yeah, because I mean, you can't be together for 22 years, and actually, I was actually looking to hear the great stuff that you guys do together, because 22 years, like I said, it's to be married, you have to work at, let alone working together as well, and I always like to hear about couples that work together over a long period of time as well. Which
I think we may have worked out some of how to really manage things. Like 10 years ago, we owned the comic book company Chaos Comics together, and at that time, I think we were really bad business owners on a lot of levels. I mean, just imagine Francisca's giving some directives to people. I come in and say a whole different set of things, and it's frustrating people, and so a lot of those sorts of things we got settled a long time ago, and now I think we have a better sense. It's hey, where do you think we should go? Hey, let's all head north. What do you think? Oh yeah, okay, great, we'll all head north.
Yeah, speaking of comic books, I saw something on your bio that I wanted to ask you about before I let you go. I see you received the Comic Book Legal Defense Fund's Defender of Liberty Award.
Yes.
What is that?
The Comic Book Legal Defense Fund was founded to defend the world of comics against First Amendment rights issue violations. In the world of comics, it's a small community, but a powerful one, and you'd be very surprised by the amount of lawsuits that come up about people buying and selling material in different communities. So, for example, an underage person may buy something that another person considers controversial or inappropriate, and boom, that shop owner could be hit with a lawsuit.
Wow.
CBLDF was founded to defend. And at the time that I guess that award is a realization of a lot of work that myself and Francisca, my wife, and others, and my team did to raise an enormous amount of money for the fund to help defend against certain violations. One that I recall was there was a guy who was accused of selling inappropriate material to minors. And whether that was true or not, even before he got his day in court, his business was shut down. He became destitute. His wife left him. So before he even got a chance to be judged in the eyes of the law, he was actually kind of rendered guilty. And that struck me as very uncool. So myself and a team of people founded an event called Defense Con in Oklahoma, where we raised money where that person was a direct beneficiary. And then I was off to the races on the First Amendment rights issue at the time, and over time we raised a significant amount of money. And the Conflict Legal Defense Fund exists to this day for that exact purpose, because you'd be surprised at how many ongoing legal cases are brought against comic and hobby shops based on people's perception of what is or is not appropriate.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
something.
I had no idea.
I mean, while we're on that topic, I mean, I volunteer for another charity that I feel even more passionate about, which is called the Hero Initiative. And in the Hero Initiative, we raise and disperse funds for comic book veterans in need. And what that one is about is very popular artists and writers and people involved in the world of comics who were once very, very popular 20, 30 years ago, or even today, may have fallen upon hard times, whether they don't have the proper health care or they need a little money to kind of get things going. And we are that safety net that raises funds and helps people get through tough times. And that work is even more gratifying because it's the need is so immediate.
Wow. That is amazing. If people want to find out more about that, where can they go?
Well, to learn more about the Hero Initiative, simply go to www.heroinitiative.org, and we have a lot of wonderful people involved in that organization, from guys like George Perez, who's an icon in the world of comics, or Joe Quesada, editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. And we make a range of products and a range of events that help raise funds and disperse funds.
That's awesome. That's great.
Thanks.
So
it just seems to be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I don't deserve anything for it. It just, in my world of thinking, for the amount of joy and pleasure I've received reading comics since I was a little kid, it's the very least that I could do to these people who contributed so much to the art form that I love so much.
Brian, before I let you go, what's next? What do you have on the agenda?
Well, I have a range of stories, but the one I am most passionate about at the moment is called Damnation. It's a film I intend to shoot this spring, and it's about a family of con artists who perform fake exorcisms in small towns and screw people out of their money. When they are called to the fictional town of Hillsdale, Arizona, to perform an exorcism, they unwittingly unleash a horde of demons into the town. And in the end, it's really up to them to learn to love their fellow man and help us out, or we're all doomed to eternal hell. So this is a survival horror story with a lot of visual effects, a lot of weird transforming effects. It's a new attack on how demons will be portrayed in a movie, and it has a much more serious tone than The Graves.
Wow. And as we began, I cannot wait to see this movie too now.
Thank you.
You're really good at describing these films. It's great stuff.
Thank you.
If people want to follow you on the web, where can they go?
A couple places. Check out thegravesmovie.com or brianpulido.com or our studio site, mischiefmakerstudios.com. Those are the main ones to keep an eye. Now, let's see, I can let you guys and your listeners know that on or about February 4th, we are launching thegraveshop.com. And that's a place where people could find exclusive merchandise centered around the Graves. That includes our beautiful Grindhouse lobby card set, ultimately the Graves soundtrack, and really cool tie-in items. Bill Moseley plays a character called the Pigman, and we are going to have his officially licensed pig nose signed by Bill on the site. So look for that and other cool exclusives on thegraveshop.com.
That's awesome. That is really
fun.
cool. I cannot wait to
My
see
favorite.
that. Again, I can't wait to see that website. And
Thank you.
and for listeners out there too, it's BRIANP as in Paul,
Yeah, P.
UL as in Larry, ID.
Yeah, D as in David, O as in Oscar.
Yes,
Thank you.
.com. And go check it out. You can follow Brian. You can follow his film, The Graves. And, of course, well, you're all going to be going out and seeing it as it is one of the 8 films to die for. Brian, I really appreciate you coming on the show, taking the time to be here. I wish you the best of luck with The Graves. And we will definitely have you back on the next horror project you have.
Sounds great, Caretaker. I really appreciate the opportunity. Have a great one. It's a pleasure.
And as I put these interviews to rest, I would once again like to thank Brian Pulido for joining me on the show. I also have to thank Brian for hooking me up with music from his film, The Graves. You're going to be hearing 2 tracks from the soundtrack. The first one is a cut called Frozen Ghost by the band The Rosedales. And then after that, a piece of music from the composer of the film, Jim Casella. And this cut is called Only a Matter of Time. So those are the 2 pieces of music you'll hear from the soundtrack. Now, an interesting note here, the singer, songwriter, and bass player for the Rosedales, Mark Dufour, is also the unit production manager of the film. So he's got a vested interest in this film, to say the least. And, Jim Casella, the composer of the film, he's also done some work for Cadillac, ABC, College Football, Regal Cinemas, and Goodwill Industries. And he also did the score to the award-winning short film There's Something Out There. I'll give you their website information on the other side of the music, so sit back and take a listen to the scary sounds of the Graves soundtrack. And there you have it, my friends. Again, I'd like to thank Brian and Mark DeFore and Jim Casella for providing me the music for the soundtrack to The Graves. If you want more information on the band The Rosedales, who did the first song that you heard called Frozen Ghost, it's real simple. You can go to therosedales.com, TheRosedales.com, and I believe they also have a MySpace site as well, myspace.com/therosedales. To learn more about the composer, Jim Casella, you just go to jimcasella.com. That's JIMCESELLA.com. There you go. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Good luck with the film. We wish you the best. Again, if you're an independent producer, independent filmmaker, you want to get the word out on a project that you're working on, we are here for you. We're definitely independent friendly here. We know that it's really tough out there. You kind of get lost in the mainstream. So sometimes, independent films don't have the kind of money to promote their products. So we here at the Graveyard Show are very, very happy to do that for you. So you can send it to us at graveyardshow@gmail.com. That's graveyardshow@gmail.com. And as I begin to close down the Graveyard, just want to mention to you, if you have a Twitter account and you want to follow the show, it's real simple. It's twitter.com/graveyardshow, or what's it? The @ Graveyard Show, GRAVEYARDSHOW. We have a few followers out there, but it's a great way to learn what's coming up on next week's show. And we don't really do very many tweets, I guess it is. I'm really not up to date on a lot of this technology, but we do give show updates, what you'll hear on the show, and we do maybe 4 or 5 a week, if that. So don't worry, you're not going to get tweets from me telling you what I'm watching or what I'm doing every second of the day. As you heard when I interviewed Black Betty, I don't even want to have a Facebook page, which I don't. And I'm very proud of that right now. I know there are many of you out there that are wondering, well, why not? And I've been asked by some of my friends in the horror community, why don't you have a Facebook page? It's just one less thing for me to have to worry about, my friends. Trust me. If I had the manpower, I would have a lot more sites going on, but just not happening. Speaking of sites, you can visit us at our website, graveyardshow.com. That's graveyardshow.com. We have links to our friends' websites, our guests' websites, all kinds of stuff on there. And we'd love for you to come on in, take a look around. And, of course, you can find the show as well on iTunes, Podbean, and Podcast Alley, among other places. You can also, if you want, subscribe to the show on iTunes. Or if you want to leave a review on there as well, that's up to you. I leave that in your capable hands. Of course, we're also on Horror Mall's The Haunt and All Things Scary, among other horror sites as well. So that does it for this week. Again, I'd like to thank Black Betty and Brian Pulido for joining me on the show, as well as, of course, BC, and music from the Rosedales, as well as Jim Casella. Just a reminder, The Graves, one of the 8 films to die for, so go check it out. We will continue our 8 films to die for discussion next week with, you want to know who's going to be on the show? You're going to have to sign up to our Twitter site or go to our website. We usually do our updates on Tuesdays, but we have some good shows lined up for you next week and the week after regarding the 8 films to die for. So we will see you in 7 days, my friends. As always, I want to thank everybody out there for listening to the show. I know there are a lot of horror podcasts out there, as well as horror websites. So the fact that you've taken the time to listen to the show really does mean a lot to me, and I really do appreciate it. And as you exit the graveyard, my friends, as always, I would like to remind you to please lock the gate behind you. We wouldn't want anyone to get out. Until next time. The Graveyard Show podcast is a proud sponsor of the Women in Horror Convention presented by Last Doorway Productions in honor of Bay Area women in horror. The convention is coming to San Francisco on Saturday, February 27th at the San Francisco Center on 1800 Market Street. Scheduled to appear are Di Green, Dottie Lux, Casey Hansen, Michelle Fatale, Raina Young, Val Kilmore, among others. Of course, the guest list is subject to change. Admission is free, and to learn more, go to lastdoorwayproductions.com. That's lastdoorwayproductions.com.
The Last Doorway Show features interviews, news, conventions, and independent horror films. Hosted by Miss Misery. Follow her journey through the horror genre as we discover the inner workings of the horror world. Visit thelastdoorwayshow.com.
Hurry, hurry.
Step
Right up.
the most
Amazing tales appear
before your
very eyes.
gathered from the four
Corners of earth and brought here to you.
at 19.
Teen Nocturne Boulevard.
See the famous
Man-eating book of
Sumatra.
or a fan
some
direct from merry old England.
whoa
Or aliens
from beyond the star.
Even such as these cannot withstand our platinum death ray.
Yes, our platinum death ray.
All these
and more.
Spread out
before you.
and all
We ask is a moment of your
Time.
spin the wheel.
time.
Take a chance.
Try your luck.
www.19nocturneboulevard.net